Child, listen, I fed him when his hands were too small to hold a spoon. I sewed his shirt. I counted every coin so he could go to school. One winter night, while the house slept, they slipped a paper into my hand. Before I knew it, they led me down a corridor to a car. And I landed in that sterile room with painted walls and a ticking clock that felt like a verdict. They left me in a small white room with a TV I could not operate, with a door that had no handle on my side. I was abandoned. He thought he had buried me. He did not know I would learn the rules, run the place, and become the one who signs the papers. Years later his own daughter brought him in, the same room, the same hallway, and when he looked up and saw me across the desk, he dropped to his knees. That look on his face? That is the kind of silence that can punish a man more than any shout. But child, this story doesn't end with him on the floor. It is only the beginning. Wait till you hear what I did next. The fluorescent lights hummed low as I sat at the reception desk of the nursing home. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the memory. The nameplate on the desk read, Director, Elmwood Senior Care. Once, that office was someone else's. Today, it was mine. I remember the night they pushed me out. The rain was tapping on the windows. My son stood at the door with his coat buttoned too tightly, his eyes cold like a searing wound. We can't take care of you anymore, Ma, he said, voice flat. It's better this way. Better this way, as if hurt could ever be better. He kissed my cheek stiffly, turned, and walked away. I stared at the empty hallway and wondered how a mother becomes an afterthought. But I survived. I breathed. I whispered prayers in the darkness. Years passed. I cleaned rooms. I handled complaints, billing, the weak, the ill. I was quiet in the corners. I watched every policy, learned every loophole, spoke to each nurse and board member, understood every rule. I didn't want revenge through anger. I wanted justice through position. One afternoon, a frail voice called out, Mom? Is that you? I turned. A man in his 60s stood at the reception. He had the same eyes, the same crooked smile he wore when he was a child. My blood froze. That was him, my son. He staggered in, leaning on a cane. His daughter behind him, holding a folder. She wore that familiar look I had seen in family gatherings, polite, confident, unaware. I rose from behind the desk. My uniform was crisp. My posture straight. He froze. His daughter glanced at me, then gasped. He dropped to his knees. Ma. His voice cracked. Silence fell. Nurses peeked. The reception area felt smaller. Every chair, every plant, every sunlit corridor conspired to trap him. The world tilted. Every move. And then I spoke, soft, calm, but full of years of waiting. Son, I welcome you to Elmwood. May I see your papers? His hands shook. Patients on wheelchairs watched from the halls, staff hovered. His daughter looked away. He swallowed. But child, do you know what came next? Do you know the storm behind my eyes? I told him. You may register here, but you will follow every rule. He looked ashamed, humiliated. He looked small. Yet something told me that was not enough. He will plead. He will bargain. And that is when I will make my move. Stay with me, child, because I will tell you how I, a discarded mother, held every broken promise in my heart, and plotted. Child, before you can understand why his knees trembled when he saw me, you must know the story that led me into that cold room. You must know how love can be twisted into a weapon, and how the sun I raised with every drop of my blood turned my own door into a prison that locked me out. I remember when he was small, his feet bare and dusty, his eyes always searching for food on the table. I would sew until my fingers bled so he could wear clean clothes to school. At night, I would go hungry just so he could eat his fill. He would hold my hand and whisper, Ma, when I grow up, I'll take care of you. Always. Those words were my lullaby, child. Those words kept me alive when the winters were harsh and the nights cruel. But life is a strange river. It flows smooth until one bend changes everything. When his father died, I held the family together with threadbare hands. I worked as a cleaner, as a cook, anything that brought coins into our house. And each coin, I placed in his pocket. Each dream, I placed on his shoulders. I believed his future was my reward. Years passed. He married. His wife was sharp-tongued, always measuring me like I was an unwelcome guest in my own home. At first, I ignored her stares, her whispers, her questions about, how long will your mother stay with us? I thought, she is young, she will learn. But child, some people do not learn. Some people sharpen their hearts into blades. One evening, I overheard them. Their voices low but their words like daggers. She's becoming a burden, his wife said. My son's reply shattered me. You're right. We can't live like this. Tomorrow, we'll take her to Elmwood. They'll take care of her. It's for the best. For the best. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. My heart sank, not because I was leaving the house, but because the boy I raised, the boy who once cried in my lap, had chosen convenience over love. The next morning, they told me to pack a bag. My son couldn't meet my eyes. His wife smiled politely, too politely. My hand shook as I folded my shawl. I wanted to scream, to beg, but my pride wouldn't let me. A mother can endure hunger but not humiliation. They drove me away. The car smelled of new leather. My son kept his hands on the wheel, his knuckles white, silent the entire way. When we reached the gates, I looked up at the words Elmwood Nursing Home. The letters burned into my memory. He left me there with one suitcase. One suitcase to hold a lifetime of sacrifice. He turned his back and walked away. I wanted to call his name, but I swallowed the sound. And child, that was the night I died as a mother, and was reborn as something else. But listen carefully, that betrayal was only the first cut. The real wound came later, on a night when I overheard something inside those very walls, something that made me vow I would rise, and one day, he would bow. Child, I will reveal the secret I discovered inside Elmwood, the spark that lit the fire of my revenge. Child, betrayal did not end at the gate. No, betrayal is like smoke, it seeps under doors. It hides in corners, it chokes you when you least expect it. The night they left me at Elmwood, I thought my heart had broken into pieces too small to gather. But what I overheard inside those walls gave me a new heart, a new fire. The room they gave me was small, the bed hard. At night, I listened to the groans of other old souls. The smell of disinfectant clung to the air like a bitter perfume. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my son's promises had turned into this silence. One night, as the halls were quiet, I heard voices drifting in through the thin door. I pressed my ear against the wall. It was the head nurse and another staff member. She's just another one of those forgotten mothers, the nurse said. Her son already paid for 6 months in advance. He said he doesn't want to be disturbed unless she dies. My blood turned to ice. Unless she dies. Child, do you know how it feels to be spoken of as if your life is just a bill, a receipt? My knees shook, but my tears dried. I made a vow right there, if I was to be left here to rot, then I would not rot quietly. I would rise. Days turned to weeks. I watched. I listened. I noticed how the head nurse mistreated some patients. How files were misplaced, how money vanished from drawers. I kept silent, but my eyes missed nothing. When the board visited, I forced myself to smile, to greet them politely, to let them see I was not a frail woman, but someone with a sharp mind. One afternoon, I heard the head nurse scolding an old man for dropping his tea. She slapped his hand away. I stepped forward and said calmly, "That is no way to treat a soul who once worked, who once raised children. He deserves respect." The board member standing nearby froze. His gaze lingered on me, not on her. That was the moment, child. The spark. He asked me later, "Would you like to help here? Perhaps assist with the residents?" My heart beat fast. I had found a door, small, hidden, but open. I nodded. "Yes, sir. I will help." And from that moment, my role changed. I was no longer just a forgotten mother in a bed. I became a helper, a listener, a quiet power in the halls of Elmwood. But child, what I didn't know then was that the same people who threw me away would soon need me more than I ever needed them. And the day would come when they walked back through those doors, only to find me not as a patient, but as the one holding the keys. Child, I will show how I climbed from silence to authority, and how every step brought me closer to my revenge. Child, do you know how strength is born? It is not born in comfort. It is born in humiliation, in silence. In the nights when you whisper to God with no one to answer you. That's where my strength came from. And slowly, Elmwood stopped being my cage. It became my kingdom. At first, they gave me small tasks. Folding linens, helping other elders to their dining tables, reading aloud to those who couldn't see. I did it all with patience, with dignity. The staff began to notice that I was dependable. Patients began to look at me as a protector. When the board visited, they saw how I organized things better than the nurses who were paid for it. One day, the director called me into his office. He was a stern man, his glasses always sliding down his nose. He tapped his pen and said, "Mrs. Khan, you have a sharp mind. Would you consider becoming a coordinator for resident affairs?" I looked down at my wrinkled hands. The same hands that once scrubbed floors for my son's education. A bitter smile touched my lips. "Yes, sir," I said. Inside, a flame roared. From that day, my life changed. I wore a badge. I carried keys. I had a desk where once I had only a bed. The same corridors where I used to shuffle with my head bowed, I now walked tall. But child, don't think it was easy. The head nurse, the one who mocked me, despised my rise. "You're just an old woman," she sneered one night. "Don't think a badge makes you important." I met her gaze and whispered, "Respect is not given by a badge. It is earned by deeds. You should remember that." The patients loved me. I listened to their stories, I wrote letters for them. I fought for their medicines when budgets were cut. Slowly, the staff had no choice but to respect me. And when the board saw the improvement, they made a decision that shook the halls. They appointed me as the new head of Elmwood Nursing Home. Child, can you imagine? The woman who was abandoned here with a suitcase now held the power to run the very place. My office overlooked the gates where my son once left me. Every time I sat there, I remembered his cold words. "It's better this way." And I promised myself, the day he walks back through those gates, he will see that the mother he discarded has become the judge of his fate. But listen carefully. What I didn't know was that fate was moving faster than I thought. A storm was already brewing in my son's life, and very soon, he would be dragged to my doorstep by his own blood. Child, I will reveal how karma knocked on his door, and how his own daughter brought him back to me. Child, the wheels of fate may turn slowly, but they never stop. The same son who left me with nothing but a suitcase. The same boy whose promises tasted sweeter than honey but turned bitter as poison. His time was coming. And do you know who became the messenger of his downfall? His very own daughter. I still remember that morning. The sun was spilling gold across the Elmwood lawn. I was signing papers in my office when I heard the receptionist whisper, "A new admission is here." I paid no mind at first, until I heard the name. His name. My pen froze. My heart, though old and weary, began to pound like a war drum. I rose slowly, walked out of my office, and there she was, my granddaughter. Taller now, graceful, her eyes lined with the same fire her mother once carried. Beside her stood a man bent with age, leaning on a cane. "My son." "Grandma?" she said softly, her lips parting in shock. She hadn't expected to find me here, not behind the desk. Not wearing authority like armor. And him, my son, his face drained of color. His cane slipped. His knees buckled. He whispered, almost choking on the word, "Ma." Child, that moment was sweeter than sugar and sharper than steel. The same gates where he once dropped me like baggage now opened to swallow him. His own daughter, the blood of his blood, was the one who signed his admission papers. I watched as she filled in the forms. Her hand did not tremble. She spoke quickly, firmly. "He can't live with us anymore. It's best if he stays here." Those words. Oh, how familiar they sounded. The echo of his own cruelty. The circle was closing. He tried to speak, his voice desperate. "No. No, I don't belong here. Please, not here." She cut him off, her voice cold. "You'll be fine, Dad. They'll take care of you." I looked into his eyes. He wanted me to intervene, to save him, to be a mother again. But child, my heart had grown stronger than pity. I folded my hands behind my back and said gently, "Welcome to Elmwood. We will follow every rule." He stared at me, tears brimming, lips trembling. He knew then, karma was not some distant shadow. Karma was standing right before him, in the form of the mother he had abandoned. But child, what he didn't know was that I still held a secret. A truth buried deep inside the records of Elmwood, one that could destroy whatever dignity he thought remained. And the day I placed that file before him, his world shattered more than mine ever did. Child, I will reveal the hidden file, the proof of his betrayal, and how I used it to tighten the chains of justice around him. Child, if you think revenge is about shouting in the street, you do not know the taste of real justice. Real justice is patient. Real justice waits until it can strike where it hurts the most. Where a man's pride, his money, and his name all hang together like a fragile string. I found that string, and I pulled. After my son was admitted, I watched him like a hawk watches the field. He shuffled down the corridor with that cane, head down, embarrassed. His daughter was polite, clinical, she filled forms, signed, and left without a backward glance. I kept my face like a calm sea, but inside I was preparing the storm. Weeks later, while reorganizing old admission files, something I often did too. Keep my hands busy, I found a thin folder tucked behind a stack of outdated invoices. It had my name on it, but beneath my name were signatures, dates, and numbers that made my blood run cold. I opened it. Pages of receipts, transfer slips, even a hand-scrawled ledger. My son had not just abandoned me, he had been siphoning my small pension for years, transferring funds to an account that belonged to his wife. There were documents showing false signatures, forged requests for assisted living upgrades, and worst of all, a note that said, "Transfer remaining assets to family upon admission." Someone had been treating my life like a bank account, and someone had been cashing checks without me knowing. I remember sitting at my desk, fingers trembling. The world narrowed to the smell of paper and the ticking of the clock. I called the administrator into my office. "Mr. Raymond," I said, handing him the folder, "do you recognize these?" He skimmed and his face went pale. "These aren't our current files," he muttered. These are forgeries." I looked at him straight in the eye. "Then we will make them real in the light of truth." My voice was soft but iron inside. "We summoned the daughter. I asked her to sit. The room felt too small for the truth that would come out. I slid the ledger across the table. "Do you know what this is?" I asked her. She swallowed. I don't know." "Don't lie," I said. "Your father's name is on these transfers. Your mother's signature is on these approvals." Her face changed, first shock, then a flash of anger. Those are old arrangements." He agreed. "Arrange?" I snapped, though I kept my voice low. "You took from a woman who sewed your father's shirts. You signed away her dignity." A nurse hovered outside the door, ears pricked. A few residents gathered at the doorway, curiosity and justice drawn like moths to a flame. The daughter's composure cracked. Her eyes stung, but she didn't speak. I called the board. I called the legal advisor we used for Elmwood's trust fund. Papers were copied. Statements were recorded. The ledger went from private evidence to official record. When I turned to my son, his face was a mixture of shame and pleading. He began, voice thin. "I did not reach for a melodramatic hammer, child. I used something far narrower and far more crippling, the law, public shame, and the staff's testimony. I changed his visiting privileges. I froze the transfers. I filed for restitution on behalf of Elmwood and for myself. I told the daughter, quietly but clearly, if you have any heart left in you, you will restore what was taken." She walked out. My son fell into his chair and sobbed, not loud, but the kind of sound that comes from a man who knows his hands are empty. But listen, as the paperwork flowed and the ledger began to unravel his life, a strange thing happened. Someone else walked through my office door that afternoon. A woman with eyes like winter steel, carrying a manila envelope that would change everything. We thought we knew about the betrayal. Child, I will reveal who this woman is, what was in that envelope. And a twist that even I did not expect. Wait till you hear who I found sitting across from me inside that envelope's pages. Child, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal. I thought the papers I found, the pension he stole, the lies he signed, were enough to tell me the whole story. But life is cruel in how it unwraps the truth. Just when you think the wound has finished bleeding, another knife slides in. And this knife came in the form of a plain manila envelope. It was late afternoon. The halls of Elmwood were quiet, residents resting after their tea. I was in my office, going through the restitution files, when a knock came. I looked up. A woman stood there, sharp eyes, lips pressed tight, a stranger. She clutched an envelope against her chest like it was a shield. "Mrs. Khan?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She stepped inside, shut the door, and placed the envelope on my desk. "You don't know me, but I know your son. And I think you deserve to see this." My hands hesitated over the paper. For a moment, I feared it was another trick. But her eyes carried the weight of someone who had been wronged too. I opened it slowly. Inside were bank statements, property records, insurance policies, all in my son's name, but tied to accounts that traced back years, even decades. At the bottom of the stack was a single handwritten letter, crumpled at the edges. My breath caught. It was from my husband, the man I buried with my own hands. His will. Child, do you know what it said? It said every penny of his savings, every acre of land he owned, was to be placed under my name, to protect me, to honor my sacrifices. But the signature line for the executor had been forged. My son had taken it. My son had turned his father's last wish into his own gain. I stared at those words until the ink blurred through my tears. My husband had trusted him. I had trusted him. And he had robbed not just me, but the memory of the man who raised him. I looked up at the woman. My voice was steady though my heart roared. "Who are you?" She hesitated. Then she whispered, "I was his accountant. I quit when I realized what he was doing. But I couldn't sleep, not knowing the truth was buried. I had to bring it to you." At that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't only about abandonment anymore. It wasn't only about a mother and her son. It was about stolen honor, a father's betrayed legacy, and a truth that had to come out, no matter how it burned. I pressed the envelope flat, looked toward the window where the sun was setting red, and I made another vow: he will not just kneel. He will confess. He will face the ghost of his father through me. But child, the story did not pause there. Because the next night, when the lights dimmed in the hallways of Elmwood, I found my son standing outside my office door, eyes red, fists clenched, trembling with words he had never spoken before. Child, I will reveal that confrontation, what he confessed in the darkness, and how I turned his confession into the very rope that tightened around his neck. Child, do you know when the guilty break? Not in the courtroom, not when the world is watching. They break in silence. When the walls are listening and their own shadow refuses to stand with them. That night, my son broke. The corridors of Elmwood were quiet, the smell of antiseptic thick in the air. I was locking my office when I heard the shuffle of footsteps. There he was, my son, leaning on his cane. His face pale as the moonlight spilling through the window. His lips trembled, and his fists clenched around a folded paper. "Ma," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Please, I can't carry this anymore." I stood still. My hand on the doorknob, my heart steady. "What is it you cannot carry, son?" He stepped closer, eyes wet. "The lies. The money. The will. I forged it, Ma. I took what wasn't mine. I told myself it was for my family, for survival. But I stole from you. I stole from Baba. And every night, his face comes to me in dreams." His body shook. He dropped the folded paper at my feet. It was another document, an insurance form with my father's name scratched out and his written over it. The proof of his crime, in his own hand. "Ma, forgive me," he pleaded. He sank to the floor, clutching at my sorry, tears wetting the fabric. I was weak. I was greedy. "I thought you'd never know. Please, please don't let them take everything from me." "Child," I looked down at him, not as a mother looks at her child, but as a judge looks at a man who betrayed his oath. My voice was calm, but it cut sharper than any blade. "You wanted me gone. You signed me away like I was an old chair. You bled my husband's name dry. And now, when the weight is too heavy, you crawl back to me for comfort. No, son. Tonight, you are not kneeling before your mother. Tonight, you kneel before your guilt." I bent down, picked up the paper, and slipped it into my folder with the rest of his sins. "Justice is not mine to give, son. It belongs to the truth. And tomorrow, the truth will be read aloud." His eyes widened, fear striking deeper than his shame. "No, Ma, please, don't." "But child." I closed my office door that night with his cries following me down the hall. For the first time in years, I slept without tears. But listen, this was not the end. The real reckoning came the next morning, when the entire board of Elmwood gathered, and I stood with every file, every forged paper, and every witness ready to speak. That was the day his mask shattered for all to see. Child, I will reveal the public unmasking, when the sun faced the board, his daughter, and me. And justice, at last, stood tall. He sobbed louder, the sound echoing through the empty hall. Nurses peeked from the corners. Residents stirred from their rooms, whispers spread. He tried to hide his face. But it was too late, the home he once dumped me in had now witnessed his fall. Child, a man can hide his sins in dark corners. But when the sun rises, every shadow is chased away. That morning, the sun rose for me, and it burned for him. The boardroom of Elmwood was full. The administrators, the legal advisor, even a few residents had been invited as witnesses. Papers were stacked before me, each one a weapon sharper than a sword. My son sat at the far end of the table. His shoulders slumped, his hands restless on the cane. His daughter, the very girl who had left him here, sat 2 seats away, her face unreadable. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Khan, you requested this meeting?" I stood, my sorry rustling against the polished wood floor. My voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "Yes. I have evidence. That my son, this man who once promised to protect me, robbed me of my dignity, my security, and even the last wishes of his father." Gasps rippled around the table. My son looked down, but I would not let him hide. I spread the documents across the table, the forged will, the stolen pension transfers, the insurance fraud. Each page landed with a sound that echoed like a hammer of justice. "This," I said, pointing to the will, "was my husband's last gift to me. But he stole it. This," I said, pointing to the ledger, "was my pension, drained for his comfort. And this," I said, slamming the insurance slip, "was his greed, bold enough to rewrite fate." The room was silent, except for the sound of his daughter's breath quickening. She leaned forward, eyes locked on the papers. "Is this true, Dad?" she whispered, her voice shaking. He stammered, I only did it for us. For the family." For the family?" I snapped, my voice rising like a storm. "You abandoned your family when you left me at these gates. You betrayed your father when you erased his name. You betrayed your own daughter by teaching her lies instead of honor." His daughter pushed back her chair, tears filling her eyes. "You used me, Dad. You told me Grandma was just too old, too much trouble. And all this time, you were stealing from her." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. His cane rattled against the floor as he tried to stand, but his shame weighed heavier than his body. The chairman spoke at last. "The evidence is undeniable. Legal action will follow. Mr. Khan, you will no longer have access to your mother's funds, nor this institution's trust. Every rupee will be restored." My son buried his face in his hands. His sobs filled the room, louder than the gavel, louder than any punishment. His daughter turned her back to him, choosing silence over comfort. And me? I stood tall, child. Not with vengeance in my heart, but with justice in my hands. I looked at him one last time and said, softly but clearly, "The same gates you threw me through have now closed behind you. This is not my revenge, son. This is karma. And karma always collects." The board dismissed us. I walked out, my spine straight, my step steady. Behind me, he crumbled, not as my son anymore, but as a man stripped bare by his own sins. But child, before I end this tale, you must know, the lesson is not only about betrayal, but about cycles. For when his daughter turned to me later that day, her eyes full of regret, she said words that touched deeper than revenge ever could. "Child, I will bring the closure, the granddaughter's choice, and the moral lesson I want every ear to carry home. Child, victory is not when your enemy falls to his knees. Victory is when your pain becomes a bridge, so no one else walks into the fire you endured." That day, I did not walk out of Elmwood as a mother who had won revenge. I walked out as a grandmother who still had love left to give. After the board's decision, silence followed me like a shadow. I sat in the garden of Elmwood, where roses bloomed despite the sharp thorns. My heart should have been dancing, after all. Justice had been served, and my son's sins laid bare. Yet, deep inside, there was still a wound that no law, no gavel, could heal. As I watched the flowers sway, I heard soft footsteps. My granddaughter stood there, her face pale, her eyes red with tears. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "Grandma, I'm sorry." Her words fell heavier than the confession of her father. I looked into her eyes, and I saw a girl caught between blood and truth. She had signed her father into Elmwood. Yes, but she had also been blind, carrying the lies he fed her. Now, she was broken, caught in shame not of her making. I reached out my wrinkled hand. "Come, child." She sank to her knees, clutching my hand against her cheek. I didn't know. I believed everything he said. I thought I was protecting him, but I was only helping him hurt you. Tears spilled down her face, and for the first time in years, my heart softened, not for my son, but for the future standing before me. "Listen to me," I said, my voice steady, though my own eyes blurred. "Blood does not make a family. Truth does. Honor does. You are not bound to repeat his mistakes. You can choose better. You can choose light." She wept harder, her shoulders shaking. "And child," I pulled her close. Because the circle of pain must end somewhere, and I decided it would end with me. As the evening sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, I whispered the lesson I want you to carry too. When a heart betrays, don't let bitterness make you its prisoner. Use that pain to build walls of strength, so the next generation walks free. My son lost his way, but you, my granddaughter, you will not. She nodded against my shoulder, her tears soaking into my sorry. In that embrace, I felt something greater than revenge. I felt peace. And so, child, this story ends not with anger, but with wisdom. Never let greed blind your heart. Never let betrayal steal your dignity. And never forget, karma walks with every step you take. If you have listened this far, remember my truth and share it. Subscribe, so you may hear more of my stories. And may every tale remind you, justice may come late, but it always comes.